have everything from free weekly podcast to our Astro Library, to our multimedia course, to pursuing certification as an evolutionary astrologer with us. And of course, our Astro Library is made up of 3 different sections. You can see, looking at the screen here, you have multiple titles with 1 to 200 hours of information for as little as $19 a month. This came about as our website decided it wanted to rebirth itself last winter, and we're very pleased with this new offering on our website known as the Astro Library. It features many of the faculty that you are listening to this week, as well as others in the world of evolutionary astrology. And of course, here's our multimedia course, our 3 different segments, each one including a binder and 25 plus hours of DVDs, and any course segment will allow you to have access as a student to over 250 hours of archived audio files. I have just finished up 10 years of teaching class once a month on all kinds of various subjects and archetypes in the world of evolutionary astrology. And starting in early 2014, I'm going to shift those monthly classes into segment 2. We're going to shift them from audio to webinar formats as classes. So as we go into that complicated subject of relationships, both from a familial and intimate perspective, you will have visual screen like this as we look at chart synastry, composite charts, etc. We'll also go through the homework assignments for segment 2 on a step-by-step basis to help anyone who wants certification in that area. All right, thank you for allowing us to show you our information from the Evolutionary Astrology Network. And at this point, Leroy, I'd like us to switch the screen over to Michelle. And Michelle, I would just like to say, is one of our speakers that is coming from the Colorado area. And so on behalf of Michelle and all of us, we just want to wish everyone who is experiencing all of these, let's say, Uranus-Pluto squares and that grand cross we see in the sky in the cardinal signs this week, everyone in Colorado who is experiencing these upsets, we just want to offer them our thoughts and our prayers and the energy that everything goes as smoothly as possible in bringing their lives back together. Amen. Michelle, why don't you give us some, welcome again, honey.
Thank you. Thank you.
Why don't you give us some information about your background, how you came to evolutionary astrology and what you offer, and then take us away on your lecture.
Okay, thank you, Kimmery. Well, first, as you can see on my screen here, I'd like to thank Jeffrey Wolf Green for, pioneering this and being the messenger for this information. So, as I look at Jesus and Yogananda, because it was Jeffrey that really got me on the path of spiritualization and self-realization, that's my first slide, thanking Jeffrey for being open in consciousness to bring this information forward. And certainly we also have to thank Leroy for all this technical difficulties and challenges that we've had, but also for bringing this all together. It's a lot of work, and thank you, Leroy, for all of your efforts, and certainly you as well, Kimmery. We want to say thank you to you for bringing all the lasting love and bringing the community together for this intensive workshop, and certainly, this information with the integrity that we bring it's very important for the movements of society and individuals. So we couldn't have done it without you, Kimmery, so thank you for all your efforts as well. And I'd like to just mention here that at my slide, my background and what got me involved in EA back when I had my Saturn return and went to an astrologer wondering if I should go through a divorce or not. And she basically read right out of Robert Hand's book, and my jaw dropped, and I just immediately ran to all the bookstores to find what I could find on astrology. And then I was blessed to find Jeffrey. And I met him first at the Astro 2000 conference, where I've met a lot of the EA community. And that was a really special and magical, moving time. I couldn't stop listening to the Saturn tape that the lecture that he had given that year. And I think on my way home from Colorado back to Des Moines, Iowa, I had listened to that all the way home. So I don't know if that's the reason why I'm talking today. It might be. But I am very grateful and blessed and honored to be here presenting today. And my first meeting with Jeffrey was pretty magical as well. And I am just really grateful for him, for his ability to put me on the path. So I just want to first thank everyone in the community for helping me along, and for this opportunity to be of service in this capacity. So I'm actually going to turn my webcam off so we can just look at the visuals, if that's okay. And I did bring a lot of visual today. So to start off with, I just would like to, let me see if I got this right here. Oh, there we go. Okay. Whoop, let me go back. There we go. Make sure I've got this right. Okay, so today's lecture, as we all know, is the mutual reception of Pluto and Saturn, and these archetypes are very powerful, some of the heaviest hitters we've got, and which is why we find ourselves in these energies that we're all working through and being able to understand more. But this introduction, what I want to go through with you today is basically, a lot of this is going to be probably review for the seasoned astrologers, but for those that are new to astrology, I hope that this can be bringing some enlightenment and some information that maybe hasn't been talked about, but certainly it's something that I have found very important in my growth. So hopefully we can bring some information forward, and I can bring some information forward, and we will go through the cycles of these two archetypes, the retrograde motions. And it's also very interesting to note that both Pluto and Saturn have planetary nodes. And both of these planetary nodes, which again are just points in space, these are not planetary bodies, but indeed have a very high significance to this information that I'm going to present today. And both of those south nodes happen to be in Capricorn, very, very close to one another. And everyone on the planet has the south node of Scorpio and the south node of Pluto at around the 17 to 19 degree mark of Capricorn. So this is very important to understand, and I'll get more into that as we continue. Why my arrows aren't working is beyond me. I'll have to use my clicker here. So this is what Jeffrey years ago had talked of these times to be analogous to a hand grenade in a steel box, which we can look at Pluto being the hand grenade and Capricorn being the steel box. Now, we can kind of already see how this is being played out in our collective and also in our individual lives. But what I'd like to look at first of all is Pluto's transit through Capricorn. And it did indeed, if my ephemeris was correct, it entered in at the end of January in 2008 and will happen to go until after its retrograde cycle. It'll end its term in 2024, around the end of the year. So it's a 16-year cycle with this Pluto and Capricorn for us. And within this cycle, we do have some retrogrades, which we know about Pluto going retrograde half the time. This is what I've mapped out, which I find very interesting, simply because the retrogrades are all occurring while the Sun is in Aries, which brings up the Grand Cross. And you can't really know the archetype of anything without bringing in all these other archetypes, which is the synthesis of what makes it individual and unique. So when dealing with Pluto, obviously we're dealing with a water sign, which is the second of the three. It's fixed in nature, and it's yin. So when I look at these retrogrades, as far as the retro going and happening while the sun is in Aries, and then the direct motion comes about when the sun is in Libra, we can see this Grand Cross being activated. So it's really important when we have, you know, these retrogrades and these direct motions. There's major shifts that occur, as we know, throughout the lives when these planetary bodies slow down from our perspective here on Earth. And what's also interesting to note and to pay attention to is the fact that these time frames, well, let me just go around here to this time frame here, is when I discussed those south nodes of the planets themselves, and these transits being very close, or the Pluto transit being very close to that south node of its own planet. So when Pluto was actually discovered, it was discovered while it was transiting its own north node. So now we have, how many hundreds of years later, its transit to its own natal south node, along with Saturn's south node. So these time frames that I've kind of highlighted here with my red pen is really these intensified times that we are coming into. So this is something obviously to pay attention and to understand. And what I'm going to get into later in the presentation, hopefully bring into some clarity as to the importance of these times ahead. But as we look at and as I bring in some of the information talking about these south nodes of these two heavy hitters, this is what's going to help us to understand, I believe, the way that we are as humans and how we are spiritualizing and how we're coming from these other times of existence, and how our memory associations on a cellular memory and on our, you know, what's already imprinted within us carries forward some of these memories. So it's really important to understand that these energies can be very powerful and very transformative, and especially, as Mark indicated earlier, with this square to Uranus and with the deep-seated unconsciousness that comes through, we are all being seeded into our own growth and our own evolution through these times of what we can call chaos and crisis. But again, it's for our own internal empowerment and our own internal soul growth. So these are the dates, and it's also interesting to note, as I was putting these up, how they're going on a retrograde cycle on an odd number of a degree, and as they go direct, they're on an even number. Now, I don't know if that has any kind of correlation or basis. I just found that to be interesting, and I just wanted to pass that along. But certainly, if somebody has any comments or questions on that, that would be something that we could investigate further. So, moving along, as far as the Saturn cycle, we've got the Saturn cycle. Of course, the entire cycle of Saturn is a 28-year cycle as it goes around the sun, but as we go into each sign, it's around a 2.5, or if we want to put the math to it, 2.33333. And so it's going to be spending some time here in Scorpio, and it's spent some time in Scorpio in the past, but this specific cycle is going to go from the October 5th or 6th of 2012 to September 19th of 2015. And within that cycle, of course, it's going to have some retrograde motions as well. And I also wanted to include in this retrograde cycle the other times that Saturn was in Scorpio, because of course anyone born between 82 and 85 is going to have this strong signature that I'll be discussing today. Anyone born between 53, 56 will also carry this signature, and anyone, of course, that is on the call that's been around for a while, that might be coming from the 23 to 26 area. That's another time that Saturn was transiting Scorpio. So, you know, we've got a lot of intensity coming through Saturn and Scorpio, and basically what I'm going to be talking about today is this mutual reception, and what this mutual reception really means. And basically, it can really amplify any of the positives and the negatives of these archetypes, and any of these influences that can be, you know, really escalated, and it can be intensified through these two, through the common themes that they carry and through the differences that they carry. So I like this little picture of the mutual reception. They each have their hands in each other's pockets. It's as if they're trying to be secretive, but yet knowing that they need to share. And yet it's the feeling as though they still have their individual agendas, but yet they know that they can be powerful with each other, but yet they still have their individual ways to operate. So when you're dealing with this Saturn-Pluto, what you've got here is the yin nature being the same. Now that's the common theme, the energy moving back to center. So, you know, when we're dealing with the sameness, that can be, you know, a lot of implosions, a lot of internalizations that go on through these times, both collectively and individually. But I wanted to also put up this date of 1776 and 1778 because this was the last time recently we had both these planets in mutual reception. So it's pretty easy to understand why what we needed to do is break, you know, what we were doing during those times, breaking free from England and the repressed nature of our government, and coming into freedom, into new life, into new beginnings. And so certainly that's kind of the energy that we're feeling in today's society, as we have felt a lot of these different repressions and oppressions, suppressions, and all these Capricorn terms that I'll be discussing today. But as you can look at this figure 8 drawing, it really does indicate that the energetic is breaking down from this old pattern and these old matrix to this new type of free form flow. Now, of course, we have to look at Neptune to bring in that free form, or that free flow, because of course nothing is stagnant, as Jeffrey's clearly pointed out in this evolutionary astrology. We cannot just define and cookbook this kind of information. You have to take into context everything, all planets, which makes up the individual uniqueness of each time space. So as we sit here in this time space versus the 1776, 1778 time space, obviously there's been a lot of improvements, a lot of civilized sophistications, a lot of technologies and things of the like that have created a lot of differences, but you can also see the sameness based on where we are as collective consciousness in society and in government, and also where we see ourselves, you know, evolving as an individual. So I like to look at this figure 8 drawing because it really does indicate this new free flow of energy. So I also wanted to mention all these visuals that I brought forward for my presentation. Basically, I just went to Google and I just said, Google, image me this. I need the image of this. I want an image of these. And this is where I got all my images. So just to let you know, I've got the information below of where they came from for the proper you know, giving everybody credit for their work as far as the artists that I borrowed from today. But this natural rulership I also wanted to bring into focus because, of course, we did have a series of people born during the 80s when that Pluto was transiting Scorpio, that we also had Saturn transiting its natal Capricorn. So it's also going to bring in this kind of flavor of information that I'm going to bring forward. And again, that figure 8 of that breaking the illusion of limitation, I really like that, that description of this image, because I really believe this is what our energy is moving towards and what our consciousness is moving towards, in these times to come, breaking free from some of these restrictions of past and these securities that we've held in place and these new dynamics that are coming through. So I wanted to bring in these dates of the 1988 to the 1991, and in one aspect because I have a daughter that was born in '89, and we'll be looking at her chart later on, and also because of the fact that it is important to hopefully bring in all those that are going to be affected by these intense energies that we're all dealing with, and I wanted to include those natural rulerships as well. So to start with Pluto, of course, here we are, you know, dealing with this binary system that Jeffrey pointed out a long time ago when he brought this information forward. But really, it is a water sign, it's yin, and it's fixed in nature. So you have to understand those dynamics on a core level to really understand what Scorpio, Pluto, 8th house is all about. And that's what I'm going to do, is blend all three of them together, because you really, it's really hard to separate them. And my intention here is to really just bring the archetype forward. So we did have the discussion earlier, was the astronomers were going through, okay, is Pluto a dwarf? Is it really a planet? And to me, you know, it doesn't matter what we call Pluto, as long as we still have this soul energy that we need to evolve through time, and that's really what's of importance. And poor Pluto, of course, got the bad, you know, seems to me he kind of got the, you know, poor Pluto out there in everywhere. But you know, he's still a planet, and this is what I had to bring this screen in, because it was just too funny to let it not be in this presentation. But this is where it sits in our galaxy, and I have to bring this slide in because it really does bring in the understanding of how its orbit is. It can stay, you know, 15, 16 years like it is doing in Capricorn, or it can stay up to 30 years in another sign, depending. And that's where you can see, because of its elliptical pull and because of how its orbit around the sun is not regular like some of these other planets that we have. And this is another view of that picture, which you can then see the reasoning behind that 30-year, 15-year type of transit. So Capricorn, Sag, it's been in the shorter times, and where I think it goes in the longer times. Let me just get the screen up here. This will show you where in that orbit it does have a very short time when it is inside the orbit of Neptune, which is also very important to understand based on this generation, like my daughter, for instance, that came through with Pluto on the outside of Neptune versus, or excuse me, Neptune on the outside of Pluto versus the other way around. So there's a lot of information in this in and of itself, based on, even I have 2 children that grew up in you know, I'm a single mom, and both of my kids are atheists, which I find pretty funny, because I was all God goddess all my life with them, and now with their, I think, needing to understand their own dynamic, and maybe it does have something to do with this transit. I don't know. It's worth investigating. But I wanted to bring this into focus because it is something that just occurred, and indeed it has a lot of relevance, I believe, with this generation. So getting back to Pluto and linking it obviously with the triad and linking it obviously with the Grand Cross, we can really understand what this dynamic, when we link it with the triad. Now if we wanted to just take a let's just turn this horrific explosion, let's just make this a wave like Jeffrey describes, and pretend this is the ocean here. And when we're doing this kind of analysis, we're looking at this tip of the wave, like we've all talked about. This is the Cancer archetype of the individuated ego that we all manifest in each life. And if we can look at this ocean down here as Neptune, we can see inside this middle portion, this is where Scorpio Pluto lies, with the need to understand what our individualness is, and then progressively through countless lives progressively evolving that egocentric dynamic into more universal thought Neptune ocean, but it has to occur through this Pluto. And it's through this Pluto fixed water yin nature that we all get opportunity to make that transition from that ego of self into that transcendent Neptune. So it's through this Pluto, Scorpio, 8th house archetype that we all get to see that. And as we move forward, the physical soul, I got this picture, I love this, because this really is like the inside of the pineal gland, you know, if you wanted to look at it from a physical standpoint. And if you see the trees of life that are being constructed, and as far as that Star of David inside there, I mean, everything that Jeffrey has ever taught as far as meditation, as far as knowing thyself, getting on as far as understanding what that transference of ego to that Neptune is about, it comes through that self-awareness. And that physical soul really is about the immutable consciousness, is it not? That does not ever die out. It can only change form, which is what we speak of when we speak of Pluto, is that immutable consciousness. So every life gets to have this passage of the soul coming in and out. And it's through these countless lives that we come into this form to understand what our learning lessons are on an unconscious desire nature through this evolution of soul. And the passage of the soul and this amnesia in between lives, of course, necessary, so we can get on with the life at hand. And as we go further through the windows of the soul, this is where, you know, we can move this consciousness from life to life, because within this consciousness, like ego, like thought and emotion, it is pure energy and it can never be destroyed. So we can only change form with this energy, and it is about that transference of that egocentric dynamic into that transcendent Neptune. Now, within the soul, there is a dual dynamic, as we all know, that returning and that separating desire. These are all unconscious desires, but this is what really drives us as individuals on that egocentric level, is that understanding that we have that desire to go, okay, new job, new lover, new whatever outside of us, or it could be an internal, okay, I want to connect, whatever. But it has to do with that needing to have that desire. That is the first separating impulse. And then we do have that need to osmose whatever it is that we connect to. And once we have that osmosis, then we have that temporary dissatisfaction, which is that returning back to the source. And that in that temporary dissatisfaction, there must be more than this, which is always what comes in. So within this dual dynamic of the soul, this is what gets us through these evolutionary impulses and these gates that we find ourselves in. So I like this picture, of course, because our minds and our bodies can get away with, you know, running away with what we really need to get at hand. And this is where we have the two types of evolution, I believe, that can come through, as we all know, the cataclysm or the slow, steady growth. And if we're in harmony and in unity with what we're needing to do in this life, then we're going to have the slow, steady. But if we're in resistance, obviously, that emotional rug's going to be yanked out, and that cataclysmic change can come in. So that's where we have the resistance, is it not? When we have those dark nights of the soul, or when we're really trying to understand some of these big dynamics within the understanding of, oh my goodness, all these past lives, I haven't done the right thing. Oh my gosh, I have to heal here, I have to heal that, I've been a piece of shit there, and all these, you know, things that the Virgo generation, and I'm including myself, can put ourselves through by beating ourselves up. But again, it's necessary to understand what this other side is, what the shadow side is, to be able to be more on that in alignment to that transcendent impulse of that Neptune pole. So I found this self-portrait to be very, very telling. And I'm just going to stop here for a second, because I want you to see how this artist really brought this concept forward of this unconscious desire nature. And of course, we as astrologers, having these gifts to bring this into conscious awareness to our clients, and this being the key right on the pineal gland, you know, how telling is that? I really enjoyed this, and I wanted to share this. And you know, art, I really feel, brings a lot of of that creative impulse forward and that ability to tap into those larger realms. And I really think that this artist had it just down. You know, he's trying to peel away part of his eye here, but he knows he has the key already, and it's already within him. You know, that's the eyes being closed. So, you know, as we move forward through time as far as evolution goes, as we start to transcend that egocentric, and that pull drives us more to that Neptunian place of understanding the universal truths and the universal consciousness versus just the self-interest or the egocentric dynamic. You know, things start to open up within the soul. Things start to happen. Things start to, you know, the Kundalini energy starts to ignite. And, you know, I've been really investigating these last couple months. It's been very interesting to me how people have had these, you know, the Seth material. I've been getting into the Seth material and reading all about soul travel, and I don't know why it's happening right now, but it is. But I had to include this simply because there's been a lot of also talk, and the clientele that, I mean, the people that I've been talking to, the clients that have been coming to me, a lot of them are Pluto and Scorpio generation, and a lot of them have been telling me stories of how they've been soul traveling. So I brought this slide in simply to let everyone know I think that these times right now that we sit in are specific for this kind of, are really, I guess, inviting for this kind of knowledge, and to really gain knowledge through tapping into that ether. And so the soul, you know, basically, as Jeffrey has pointed out, is that unconscious desire nature that really is driving us. But in most of us, in 7 out of 10, it's going to be the unconscious. And, you know, that's where it can bring in a lot of the psychological phobias. So, you know, it's really up to us astrologers to help the clients understand what it is that they are here to do on that soul level. So that's where I know that even I myself, you know, seeking answers for my issues, it's been very enlightening to have this kind of information brought forward. Now, just kind of going off on a side note, because of the fact that, you know, genetic coding is something that's important, and we've got a lot of things happening right now in our societies along the lines of this genetic coding, like the cloning and such, which can be obviously very beneficial to science and technology, but it has its moral, you know, implications as well. And I also just wanted to mention, I did, you know, kind of promote there for a while this really great movie called Cirrus, which is about extraterrestrial life. And I wanted to kind of bring that in because the fact that they did, you know, take this little being, and it's shown in the movie, which is, you know, to the Stanford University and all these blah, 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 doctors and professionals, you know, to try to figure out what this was. And it's really, I really strongly recommend watching this movie. If you haven't had a chance to do it, I think you can like rent it for $5 or something, but it also is just great information based on what's coming. And I believe that the ET phenomena is just starting to be introduced, and I think that there's been a lot of poo-poo around it, but that's just because of the government not wanting to have it brought out. But Dr. Stephen Greer has done a lot of great work on the subject, and I highly recommend anyone that has not had a chance to watch it to please do watch it, because it does have to do with the extraterrestrial life that I really believe also is divine intervention for a lot of horrific things that have gone on the planet. So the RNA DNA, of course, is also representing of Pluto, and of course the urge to merge, which is really what I want to be talking about today, and the sexuality aspect of Pluto, along with the repressions and the oppressions and the suppressions and depressions that come through the Capricorn archetype. So, you know, I'm going to touch on some really probably touchy stuff, and I hope please forgive me if I trigger. I hope it can bring some insight, but I'm sure I might bring up some triggers as well. But obviously, the Scorpio archetype is the urge to merge, and when we deal with that on a relationship basis, that's what brings in all of these commitment issues. And when I talk about dark arrows, which I'll get to later, we'll talk about, you know, these commitments. And I really enjoyed Mark's talk just a minute ago, or, you know, an hour ago, about the commitment to the self to heal, which I think all of us as astrologers have done. And I think every client that we've talked to has come in with that the need to go through that as well. And we can certainly have that commitment to ourselves to go through these tough questions and asking these tough questions, and also to really look at ourselves honestly. And so the marriage commitment, as we sit in our society today, you know, 7 out of 10 people are going to fall into that dependency mode, whereas the you know, 3 out of 10 are going to look at things a little differently and define them a little differently. But certainly, you know, commitment is going to fall under this category of Pluto. And then, of course, once we make that commitment, that can lead to that fear of entrapment, which is the case in my life, which was what was happening when I went to see that astrologer at the age of 29. Really I got seated with the download that if I didn't do something with my life at that point during that Saturn return, I knew that my soul would take itself out through some kind of illness. I needed to really, my soul was just stagnant in that marriage, and I didn't want to break the family up because of the ideals that I had that went along with that consensus reality that I was brought up in. So, you know, this was a big question for me, and very, very much a fear of entrapment when I got myself into that marriage. It wasn't that I didn't leave my ex-husband because I didn't love him. He was a wonderful man. I left because I was entrapped, which I think a lot of people can identify with. So there is that fear, and there's that balance. And this is what I talk to a lot of these Pluto and Scorpio generation, that they come in with these relationship dynamics and these relationship issues. So there's a fine balance between these two. Now, what we are also dealing with is the manipulation that can come through the Scorpio dynamic, and all the psychological paradigms that come through that feeling of manipulation. And of course, within the relationship, we can have sexual manipulation, which then can lead to a lot of relationship dramas. And I put this up: how many times do you need to get hurt for you to know when it's time to let go? You know, we're bringing in the Taurus archetype here as well, because a lot of Taurians and a lot of people that have a strong Taurus archetype tend to stay a little too long in that abusive relationship, unfortunately. And we, you know, coming from this patriarchal overlay of the matriarchal times, which I'll talk about later as well, we tend to hit that override button based on our own insecurities. So, you know, violence can obviously occur through these repressions or suppressions, or they can also occur through the manipulations and the sexual controls and all the alike that can come through some of these relationship dynamics, unfortunately. So this power and powerlessness, you know, this feeling of, okay, where am I in this relationship? Am I empowered? Am I powerlessness? Where's my power at? Do I have power? Have I given my power away? You know, where's that balance? Where's that healthy give and take? You know, this is something that we're all trying to understand, and specifically this Pluto and Scorpio generation that, you know, in my daughter's case, has that strong Saturn quality, those 3 planets conjunct, and those outer planets conjunct in Capricorn. And certainly you know, within all of our relationship dynamics, we get to be shown where that attraction, repulsion comes through internally within ourselves, and also externally within our relationships. So there is this need to really balance this. And these times right now, I really have to say, they are a time of empowerment. I know that this subject matter that I'm speaking of can be really very heavy, but I'm hoping to bring in, and I hope to bring in that empowerment aspect as well. So we all have opportunity here, that's for sure. And power is we all have the power as well to make the change. It's just a matter of understanding where it's at, and if we're abusing it or if we're using it, and where's our balance there. And of course, if we look into our societies, we can see that we're not using it properly. But this is where we'll get into some of the control factors within the governments and such. But death, of course, is part of Scorpio, and rebirth, of course, is part of Scorpio. We've got both of these concepts coming in through this archetype, and you know, death can be very, very scary and bring in a lot of fear, but the rebirth can also bring in a lot of hope and a lot of new newness and new, let me just say, just new paradigms to come through and new hurdles to look at. You know, we're all in a state of becoming. So I wanted to bring in a couple of these images simply because, yeah, I'll flip back to this rebirth. That I love this, the Buddha reincarnation of rebirth. You know, their little form here that nothing is permanent. You know, we're all coming from this energy outside of ourselves, but yet when we come into the form, we get to really understand what these senses are about and what the addiction to these senses. But we also, as we come through these metaphoric deaths, you know, they don't have to be physical. Of course, it can be, but they can also be very metaphoric. You know, as we come through life of, okay, this no longer is of value, coming into new, and this rebirthing that always takes place within consciousness and within our evolution. And whether it's a slow, steady or a cataclysmic type of evolution, it's all necessary. So we have, you know, in nature a lot of symbols of rebirth, of course, and within Scorpio, obviously there's the reason for coming into that fire of absolute, you know, blow everything up, make it absolutely known to whatever it is I need to see, and then coming through that alchemy of a totally different person, you know, a totally different individual coming through that experience. You know, you really do have to go to that fire, so to speak, and morph through it. Now, I wanted to bring up some of these morph pictures because we all, in our times of transition, and of course Scorpio is not going to be anything about a transformation. It's really about that worm to butterfly, or that tadpole to frog. And you know, I really can't stress enough the reason why we have resistance with Pluto is because who wants to go into this chrysalis state of absolute nothingness to then come out this butterfly? I mean, it's a tough thing to look at, you know, when we're all falling back on what's secure and what's known and what's already in place. And it's so much easier to go back there than to take that courage and that evolutionary risk to risk that whatever is in front of us for that new beginning. So getting, you know, into that place it takes sometimes a cataclysm, doesn't it? I mean, you know, we sometimes don't want to go there. So I wanted to bring up some of these compulsions that come through this archetype. And of course, within our society today, with the Virgo archetype, we've got all these obsessions, compulsions around beauty and health and care, and of course cosmetic surgery. And you know, when's too much, you know. Obsession, compulsions are all around us, and of course we also can bring in the compulsions and obsessions with the addictions that are occurring, and you know, bringing in all these other archetypes. For instance, I know Chiron has a really big connection to some of these compulsions, and of course the alcoholism that's on the planet is just out of control, and we promote it in our society, unfortunately, but it's really that can, in and of itself, can create obviously a lot of problems, but it's very, very prominent in our culture. And you know, as these kids are growing up with this video age, you know, these compulsions, and I'm first one to raise my hand. I love this Angry Bird game. I mean, I love it. It's been a blast, but it can be very obsessive, right? You can get on the game and not want to turn it off, you know.
Michelle, that looks like my teenager right there.
Yeah, yeah. This is exactly what's happening. You know, consumption, and you know, the obsession compulsion can obviously bring in a lot of problems if they're taken too far, and this is something that we're dealing with psychologically on a lot of levels with these archetypes. So you've got kids coming through this time that are very much part of this generation that are bringing in these compulsions, obsessions.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I know. I like this one too.
Honey, I thought I'd let you know that you're right at the halfway point or a little beyond it, and if you wanted to take a mini break, I could certainly allow you to do that while I launch a poll.
Okay, sure.
Sure. Okay, so let's do that so Michelle can take a little break. Thank you, honey. It's just been tremendous information, and I kind of love your movie slides as we're going through here. I think they're just very rich, so appreciate all the effort you've put in. And as I launch this poll and Michelle takes a break, let's see if what Jeffrey Green books have you read as an attendee today? Either or, both Pluto volumes 1 and 2. As you know, Jeffrey also co-wrote with his Pluto brother Stephen Forrest, Measuring the Night, volume 1 or 2. A very short but powerful book, Uranus, Freedom from the Known. Have you read a couple of those, or have you read all of those? As half of you have been nice enough to give us your input and voted, we'll wait another 30 or 40 seconds for Michelle to return and launch the poll results. Okay, Michelle, hold on. We're just finalizing the poll results here. All right, let's see. Let's close the poll now and see what our results are. All right, well, we have some EA aficionados, to say the least, on this call. So most everybody has read, 4 out of 5 have at least read all these books mentioned, and that's wonderful. All right, so I'll hide those results, and I'll turn the mic back over to Michelle. Thank you, Michelle.
Sure. Okay, so let me just get back. Okay, so obviously we've got a lot of phobias that come through Scorpio, and also, of course, we've got a lot of secrets and secret activities that come through Scorpio. So I'm kind of going to have to flash forward a little bit because I'm taking too much time here. So again, you know, we've got a lot of hidden things going on within our society, and I like this one a lot, U.S. public. Now stay like that forever. Yeah, this is what the officials would like, wouldn't it? But then there's always, you know, there's some of us that are not in this kind of consciousness after all, but yet we're saying, you know, wait a minute, there's got to be something else going on here, and this is where we get some resistance. And I really like this picture of this kid here because it looks like, you know, he's just this little boy, and all over the world this is happening, and of course these are the times, and there's reasons for it. This I brought up simply because I do need to talk about, this is my slide, I liked it to, you know, the compulsions as far as the enneagram, but as far as the sextile aspect between, you know, Saturn and Pluto and this mutual reception. You know, this is really important to understand because this is the archetype, and let me just read right out of the book because this sextile falls in the last quarter square, and it is the new creative identity of the individual in relation to the cosmic whole. It's now given productive purpose, understanding to actualize the individual's universal social role in this life. The transition between the past and the future can be easily made or easily resisted. Okay, so this is the sextile that's coming through this Saturn Scorpio in Capricorn Pluto. And that sextile is that feeling of, okay, I need to release, but yet it can also bring in the ease, like it mentioned. So it can be like a time of, okay, you know, yeah, I got it, but, you know, no, you really don't, you know. So there's going to be a lot of, you know, in this letting go and releasing, there also has to be those new seeds of that newness coming through. So this is an aspect to throw off some of that past, incorporate some of the new, but at the same time to do the work and not feel that ease and not take the easy way out. So with that, you know, that's something that we're all, I think, being asked to do with this mutual reception, is to really, like I've said in my blogs and when I talk to my clients, is it's time, it's a man up, it's a responsibility, it's a maturity aspect, right? So Saturn, let's talk about Saturn for a minute. I mean, Saturn's got a 28-year cycle, and as Mark indicated, you know, at the first 7 years we find our immortality, which I know, coming from a Sag point of view, as Woody Allen, you know, I'm on his boat here. When I found out that I was going to die someday, and it happened when I was 4, I went into a panic. I was in panic for about a week, and I don't think my parents settled me down until I was probably 6 or 7. I was just like, Woody Allen, are you kidding me? We die? No, 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 this isn't going to happen, right? So that was my first experience of that Saturn cycle. Was I really thought, no, that's a gyp. This isn't happening in my narcissism. So, you know, my Saturn cycle, I've always been I've always known to take a look at, because of course it was that first Saturn cycle when I discovered astrology. And so here I am at the age of 50 speaking of it. So Saturn in its 28-year cycle, you know, that 7 of knowing its own mortality, setting up that time of time-space. You know, we really are in this time-space universe, and Saturn being that leader of what the time-space continuum is about, and that karma that can lie in within that, and we'll talk about that. Okay, I have to put this up because once a Capricorn sets a goal or target, they never fail to achieve it, no matter how much struggle they may have to put in, which is so true. And I just like this little piece of structure. I wanted to add that because I just am, you know, the little artist inside me wanted to bring that forward. But structure of all kind comes out under this Saturn archetype. And of course, I wanted to also bring in the runway model. I'm sure this was down on the, you know, on the catwalk there in New York City. I like this image, and I wanted to just bring it forward to show everyone. But let's just talk a little bit about this time-space karma that we find ourselves in, because we are in a time-space universe, and this is where Saturn comes in. I like this little image of the completely present and the completely gone already. We can pretty much say that, I don't know, I mean, most conscious awareness on the planet right now, as we know, is going to be in that cattle consciousness, and that 70% of the blind leading the blind, which falls under this Saturn. So I can almost put them in the completely gone already category, or we could put them in the, okay, becoming more aware. I don't mean them to be completely gone, please forgive me. I mean that to be in their state of evolution, of course. And my parents coming through a very consensus reality myself, you know, this is really, I think, really where the completely gone already can come in, is those that are in that second stage individuated. No, sorry, I'm checking out. I'm not going to engage into the society. But time-space is necessary where we're at, obviously, in this world where we are. But there are other universes that don't have time-space, and this is the reality which we sit in, which is why we have some of these dilemmas that we're coming through, and this maturation process that we're all coming through. And I like this little picture of this lasting love couple of maturity. But maturation, emotional maturation, is really what we're all being asked to do during these times. So what does Capricorn bring? It's going to bring some rules and regulations to our individual lives along with our global society. So these rules and regs are there to make sure that, of course, we have to have them. Why? Because we can't be running all willy-nilly like in society, doing whatever we want. We've got to have some structure, obviously, to be able to survive and to be civilized. And as I talk about the dark arrows, we'll talk about, you know, the matriarchal times when it was more on the primary brain. But now that we've evolved as species, we've developed these societies, and necessarily so we can survive together as a unit versus, you know, individually. And what we can also be created through these dynamics is the social isolation, if I can speak, social isolation, thank you, that occurs through obviously some of these phobias, and that can come through the Scorpio archetype in mixed with this Capricorn archetype. So with Capricorn, we have obviously our ancestry of where we come from, our imprint, obviously, of where we come from an ancestral point of view, but also from our own internal family, as far as I just spoke of my very consensus parents. And indeed, my soul came through very consensus parents. And yes, Kim Marie, I was the black sheep of the family, as she well described yesterday. Now, obviously, we also have the structure of consciousness, as Mark was talking about earlier when we talk about Saturn. And this is very important. I like this little picture here because it's like the subconscious is 90% of the mind, and the conscious mind is only 10%. I don't know if this is really true or not. I like this working model. That's why I decided to put it up. This is the effects of the moon. Again, we're dealing with that opposition of Capricorn, that personal, and then the impersonal being more of the Capricorn. Now, this conscious mind of what we know versus this unconscious mind. I like this unconscious mind feeding this conscious mind, because really that's what's happening within all of us individually, is that we do have more of the impressions coming from the unconscious memory associations of past than what we are being created in this life. So that's why thoughts are things in this quantum physics that we're going through right now in these new flow of energy. This is what's really developing our life, is it not? I mean, I can almost look back at all the songs I used to sing in the 70s. Thank goodness there was Karen Carpenter. And my life has pretty much turned out to be those songs. So, you know, careful what you think, because that's exactly what your reality is going to come. And it's true, and that's exactly what we're discovering. So through this Capricorn archetype, we can come through a lot of strength, determination. This determination is that fixed will. As we look at the cardinal cross of Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, Libra, we have that Aries will coming through, obviously. So when we talk about a lot of these archetypes, we do indeed bring in the cardinal crosses of the energies. The determination that comes through Capricorn is necessary. The responsibility then equals this accomplishment, and then this success, which that mountain goat always has one foot grounded on that mountaintop in front of the other. So success is obviously on our material universe what most people find to be important is that obviously the more money you have, the more successful you are. This is the way we measure success in our material universe. Well, of course, I beg to differ. This is just, again, mainstream, but there's lots of other ways to have success, obviously, but this is what can be accomplished through this archetype. And I like this little saying, be patient and tough. Someday this pain will be useful to you, which I know a lot of us can relate to with this cardinal of this Saturn archetype. And with Saturn, obviously, it brings repression. And when we deal with these dark arrows of this society of civilizations that have come through our times, repressions and all the alike oppressions can come through this cardinal archetype as well, which then can equal the nationalism on a global sense, and you know, on an individual sense. Okay, yes, I am lucky to be an American. I'm happy to be an American. Why was I born an American versus someone in, say, Australia, for instance? You know, so this is really what makes up that difference. You know, we do have, and I like this image of these two. It looks like one's Napoleon, and then we've got you know, Europe on the other side here, it looks like, and they're just carving out their little pieces of the earth and the world like it was theirs. And now this is where you can get a lot of the obviously the 7 out of 10 consensus reality, the blind leading the blind, and the power struggles that come throughout that kind of consciousness. Now the boundaries that come through the cardinal archetype of Capricorn, I like this image because, you know, we are in this technological age, and I liked how this was depicted, and so I just brought this forward. But boundaries obviously can be, you know, countries, and it can also be our individual boundaries. So nationalism is something that we're all dealing with on a global sense, and I like this Einstein quote that says it's an infantile disease and it's the measles of mankind, because again, it's that blind leading the blind. And I think if you were to ask every human on the planet, like Jeffrey mentioned back in the 80s when Pluto was transiting Scorpio, if we want war or not, you know what every person on the planet would say: no, we do not want war. We would like to live in a happy, peaceful environment. And it's that 10% of the world that decides we are the power, and we will then say what what the governments will do and dictate what the people will be. And so, of course, this is where the judgment comes in, of that 10% dictating over that 90% of the population of what's coming down and what's going to be happening in the world. So as you know, Jeffrey's talked about the drawing the line in the sand between this or that, as far as the Jupiterian belief structure, which is the fundamental basis for most of the conflict on the planet today. And I just wanted to bring this little slide in because Pluto and Saturn really, I thought this piece of artwork that this gentleman brought forward depicts this kind of combination of energy. Here you've got the skeleton that's you know, the structure of the human, and it's just pretty much, you know, deteriorated. So what does this equal as far as their likenesses? Control, of course, is one of that. That's the, you know, these the Capricorn archetype, you know, has absolute death grip on control and fears losing it, and Saturn too needs that control in order to sustain that stability of the past in the resistance of the growth. So what's of secret? Well, of course, this unmasking of power with Pluto and Capricorn, and this is a, of course, corrupt power comes through these times, and we're already seeing this. And of course, in the United States of America, you know, I don't believe that we're in a democracy, but then that's just my opinion of my, you know, conspiracy theories. I might not share that with everyone, but this is where we have some problems with authority that I think started back in the 80s. And of course, we do have this hierarchy that's been in place since our founding fathers founded our wonderful country here of freedom. And I just wanted to bring that in, but there's certainly abuses of this power as well that they truly knew about when they came over and kind of started to do the same thing that they kind of broke free from. So in my opinion, it's just a different form of that repression. Oh, sorry, let me just go back so everybody can read this. You know, it's hard not to abuse the power when you're in a consensus reality. I think that that's just inevitable with a lot of consciousness when they come through that consensus archetype. So abuse of power is definitely a possibility, and we're seeing it in our times today. And I like this because it kind of reminded me of me and my daughter. Yeah, when I was your age, I had mastered repression, you know. And of course, power is no surprise to any of us. We've come through a lot of this life in the governments of power, and of course we've known throughout history we've had oppressions and the hierarchy of those that have been in power. So this is no surprise to us to come through these control issues, and I like these kinds of little slides. I mean, I'm just bringing in slides here because I'm flashing through them because I wanted to get through them a little bit. But obviously, we do have a leadership mind that these zillionaires, I like this, abusing these people that are not quite of the power. So corrupt power is definitely happening in our world. And when I Googled power, I brought this came up, and I had to bring it in. You know, I'm sorry. Please forgive me, but I found it pretty funny, and that yet I found it very, very moving as far as that Pluto and Scorpio generation, and also that Pluto and Scorpio as it transited. This is what set this all in motion, in my opinion, of what's being played out today, specifically dealing with this fracking stuff that's going on all over the world. And that in and of itself is a separate lecture. But, you know, we're all dealing with this news of rich people paying rich people to tell the middle class people to blame the poor people, you know, and that's what they're trying to feed us. And of course, you know, Monty Python's view of it brings a little bit of, you know, we can laugh a little bit, but yet it's pretty serious stuff, is it not? And Pluto obviously brings war and destruction, and we've seen enough of this, and we've had enough of this on the planet, of course, but we're not at a place of evolution, obviously, to be able to just come into unified wholeness. We're not quite there yet. But it is important to become aware of what's really happening consciously, as far as the 3 or 4%, or I should say maybe 25% of those of us that are not in that consensus reality and are choosing to make different choice and bringing community together differently, and to heal through these times of crisis in an empowered way, like Mark was describing in his lecture. So, authority, yes, respect my authority, question authority. All of the authorities are being questioned, and it is about really waking up the 7 out of 10 people, and that consensus reality does need to have the wake-up call for any real movement collectively to occur. But as we know, most of those people are going to be in that obey mode, and through, of course, not obeying, what occurs is a punishment, or you know, the judgment of whoever says this is right and this is wrong, and that being, again, based on that consensus reality, and those rules then being distributed for all. And I like this, you know, Pink Floyd saying we don't need no education, we don't need no thought control. I put this up because, you know, we really are under this propaganda of our TVs and what we're told. And unfortunately, the consensus reality only, does buy into that thought control. So, there's more to it. So this Capricorn fears losing it. The Scorpio fears losing control, but indeed this is exactly what needs to occur. And I like this little picture because it says if you hold on to the handle, she says it's easier to maintain the illusion of control, but it's more fun if you just let the wind carry you. Which that's really what Neptune in Pisces is bringing, is that energy to really allow these veils that are so paper thin to be accessed, to be able to move through. So I'm just going to buzz through some of these slides because I want to get to my dark arrows and talk more about what that's bringing in. So here's the individual boundaries that I brought up just as a healthy boundary and a rigid wall. So we've got a little bit of in between going on, and everyone's going to fall, depending on where they are in their life, somewhere within this. I like this image because really we are all asked to mature and blow through and decondition through some of these major lifestyle changes, and specifically I indeed had my own to go through these last 6 months. So let's talk about these gender issues, and let's talk a little bit about these dark arrows and what happens during these times. And I think that our souls all know these times of back when we're all in one with nature, and when we were living in with nature, and the primary brain was more engaged, and this primary brain was just a survival brain. And there was, at this time, when Jeffrey described these times of 6,000, 8,000 BCE, the Cancer Capricorn subage of these times, this transition of 1,000-year patriarchal overlay. But back when we were just really operating instinctually, we didn't have these nuclear families or these civilizations that are in place today, obviously. So we've had this natural, obviously, the natural sexual desire nature. And within this Capricorn, through this patriarchal overlay, we became more of the cerebral cortex being formed over that primary brain. We became more civilized and more mental in orientation versus primal and instinctual. So this set up these archetypes and these types of ways of being as far as these roles that we play, males and females, and what their specific roles were. And so the gender assignment comes through this Capricorn Cancer archetype, and I really like this picture of the two combined, because we're all on a soul level both male female, aren't we? And we do come through obviously gender assignment, and I certainly can identify with this, being when Jeffrey described my past lives as most, coming from male energy and now female, that did help me obviously to understand my own growth. So the gender archetype is definitely in play right now, and it's very, very much a part of what's being played out in society as far as the roles that we're playing. And this dark arrows that come through is basically, just to describe this, is when the soul naturally has instinctual desire nature to be sexual in one way or another, but then the society says, no, sorry, that's against the rules. Well, the natural repression or suppression of that sexual desire nature gets bottled up. And over time, it can then become whatever as we know, whatever we repress or suppress later becomes distorted. And those distortions can come through those civilized times of oh, sorry, that's not acceptable anymore, whereas maybe before it was. So these are where these dark arrows can come through. And we certainly have a lot of these repressions and distortions being played out. So, of course, the distortions of what's natural, and then also the guilt that comes through all the distortions. And we can certainly look at as we speed through time, again, this matriarchal time, it's not that we didn't have our issues, because again, we were on pure survival mode, but our brain hadn't quite developed in a place of this civilized understanding. So as we've evolved through time, if you want to just fast forward up to the Garden of Eden myth, and again, this is just a myth based on, again, man-made laws, man-made on a male supremacy, not whereas when it was in a matriarchal times, when we were all making love on the earth, the god at that point was yin in nature. It was a feminine. This divine feminine was a sacred sexual being, and we were able to instruct the proper use of the sexual energy, whereas it's now gotten all lost and distorted through these times of these repressions, suppressions, oppressions, depressions that we've all come through the times of. And so every person on the planet has memory association of the matriarchy and has memory association, of course, of this patriarchy. And if we want to speed through time, then we've got this now Adam and Eve myth, just these last 2,000 years, based on Adam representing, again, this man-made religion, man-made patriarchal sky god image, and Adam represents that pure energy and is given into Eve, and now has the downfall, or no, sorry, has that guilt linked with anger, and then Eve representing that sensuality, sexuality, and that downfall of the downfall of man on her consciousness, which is then that inferiority pathology of the sadomasochistic pathology that comes through just that Garden of Eden myth. And certainly we all, you know, anyone that's ever wanted to spiritualize on the planet on a soul level is going to come through these religious times. And these, again, are man-made laws based on man-made projections of what they felt was, at that time, oh, we're superior to female, we are the gods, and that's what we are still in existence today. So, you know, the males and the females had a couple different roles to play when this patriarchal came into existence. The males had, okay, I'm going to be the day-to-day guy and be in the house with the woman, and I will operate like that, or the wild man that wants to come in, plant the seed, and run. And then the women had the two choices when this patriarchal came into overplay, and that was to be the good wife and have the babies, or to be operating like the prostitute and educate herself and be more man-like. So every single man on this planet in the relationship dynamic wants to have the day-to-day woman and wants to have the whore, the prostitute. Just like every woman on the planet wants to have the day-to-day guy, but just every so often wants to have that wild man come in and plant the seed and run. And this is why we have so much distortion within our relationships, and it's why there's so much of this monogamous, trying to be monogamous, oh, it's not working, try it everywhere. There's triangles everywhere in these relationship dynamics, and I'm seeing them throughout every client I talk to. It's like, oh yes, I'm married, but I'm having an affair, and oh yes, I have this boyfriend and that boyfriend, and oh yeah, or you know, it's just where we are is part of society. We're not quite at that monogamous state of evolution quite yet, but indeed we are trying to work through a lot of these distortions that have come through the repression of the natural sexual desire nature. So the guilt that comes through obviously comes through that man-made law of judgment, and that of course can bring in a lot of, you know, the repressions, suppressions, oppressions, depressions. And as I said, you know, these dark arrows as we come through time can be very overt, and they can be very under the radar. I mean, I can find in my own examples, which I'm going to bring forward here, those examples of how it can be obviously distorted. But I think that within the Pluto and Virgo generation specifically, we are really being shown through the sadomasochistic pathology of this inferior Eve or the superior Adam, where we need to adjust within ourselves that connection to divinity, so that we can heal through a lot of these distortions that are being shown to us through these relationships. And the blessing is being, you know, having them be brought up through our relationships. So the distortions obviously are there, and the anxiety and the depression comes through, obviously. A lot of the grief comes through these kinds of sexual repressions and the emotional repressions. And of course, the more emotional the event is, the less sensible people are. This can be collective and individual, but this is also necessary. Now, what I'd like to do is really empower the, you know, bring some empowerment, because what we're all trying to do collectively and individually is just to know source energy. I mean, this is what our soul comes into this form to do, is to understand the senses and to understand itself as oneness, you know, through the separateness, right? And you know, I'm totally like off of my what I was even going to talk about, but I wanted to just kind of bring in my own example. We're kind of getting to the last couple minutes here, and in my last 15 minutes, I just wanted to bring in a little bit of an example of what kind of took place in my life Of course, me being the narcissist that I am, healing through that kind of dynamic, and also through the sadomasochistic pathology within relationship. I'm just going to fast forward a little bit through my slides here because, of course, lasting love is important, of course, to every soul on the planet. And, you know, I just brought in some pictures of some wonderful seeding love, growing love, containing love, holding love, sharing love. And, you know, unconditional love, of course, is there. We all have it within ourselves. It's just we get thrown into our bodies here, and then we get to relate, and then we get to be shown what the external environment gets to show us. So the one love obviously being within ourselves, the divine love within ourselves, the not separateness, the knowing that we're not disconnected from all things, that we are all one, that the quantum physics that this new time space shows us is that we are capable of healing through these dynamics, and this is the message. So dear human, you've got it all wrong. You didn't come here to master unconditional love. That is where you came from, and you will return. You came here to learn personal love, universal love, messy love, sweaty love, crazy love, broken love, whole love, infused with divinity, lived through the grace of stumbling, demonstrated through the beauty of messing up often. You didn't come here to be perfect. You already are. You came here to be gorgeously human, flawed, and fabulous, and then to rise again into remembering. I really, really, really love that. So I wanted to read that aloud. So here we go. Narcissist 1, Narcissist 2. Okay, so I have to joke here. Now, this is my own little story because I know most of you that know me already have seen me on the mat. And of course, I'm not shy in that aspect. However, I'm going to expose myself again, this time to a horrific tale of a relationship drama that I came through with a gentleman who indeed is just as narcissistic as I. And in our tumultuous sadomasochistic relationship. So this female is myself, and that's my wheel on the inside. And as you can see, I too have a very heavy Capricorn Pluto influence. Let me get my little red pen here. This is kind of handy. I just want to indicate here this south node being ruled by Capricorn and its ruler in the 6th house, along with this 1st house Pluto, and then its ruler obviously the moon being at the top in my chart. So, you know, Jeffrey, when he gave me my reading, bless his heart, you know, he said, Michelle, I don't even want to tell you about your most recent past life, honey, because it was horrific physical trauma. You don't want to know. Which I could feel. That Venus in Cap coming in was definitely, I came in a week after Kennedy was assassinated. So this chart is definitely, I came in when the world was in mourning. And I myself, most of my life, until I met Jeffrey, I was in mourning for my life. So, you know, not to make light of that, but certainly there's some dynamics here. And when we talk about this other gentleman, I'll just call him Mountain Man. He too coming into this life with a heavy Saturn makeup here. Saturn on the south node is indication of the same dynamic of a Capricorn south node. You can also see here this soul is a hypersensitive soul, which is true. And he too comes from a lot of Virgo insecurities and that such as well. Now there's obviously similarities between the two of us, and there's a lot of differences between the two of us, but we had to give you a little backdrop, a 12-year in-out relationship, purely sexual only. It was nothing more, nothing less than, it was purely just a booty call, plain and simple. And in between his girlfriends, in between my boyfriends, we would connect. Now, this was going on for 12 years, but in the last 6, let me just go to what had occurred and give you a little backdrop. I'm just going to sit here for just a second so that you can kind of digest the 2 synastries, and then I'll give you a little backdrop on what happened. I had been out of a relationship. I'd been praying for him to get a new relationship because I knew how sadomasochistic we were together and how I wanted to just really be done with that archetype and move forward, but I wasn't quite done yet. So I felt him psychically just kind of you know, we've been connected. I have obviously attachment issues with all my fourth house stuff, and I physically felt him leave, and I chiming in to his text, and I asked him how he was doing after not speaking to him for quite a while. He said, "I'm great, I've moved on, I have found a girlfriend," and I was really happy for him. I actually was happy. I was, you know, okay, a little, oh, okay, a little bit. I was, but most of me was pretty happy about it. I'd been praying for him to get a new girlfriend. So I said, "Oh, that must be why I felt the disconnect. You know, you got a new girlfriend. I'm very happy for you." I sent them text off, you know, saying very happy, very happy. And so the following day or the following week or something like that, I think it was a week later, he chimes in to me, which I found pretty, you know, kind of weird. And I thought, okay, so I decided to talk to him via text, and it kind of escalated into an invitation up to his house the following evening, which I was actually really excited to accept, and I did. And I said, I'm looking forward to seeing you. I'm excited, blah blah blah. So what happened? Let's just go to a different chart here. What happened was, let me go to his chart. Let's see. I went up to his house on a Friday evening. The moon was void, of course, this night. I'll never forget. And I actually had placed a couple calls to him prior. He did not receive them, or didn't. I got his voicemail. I didn't talk to him personally. Now, this gentleman, Mountain Man, sells cars, and at the time he was selling vehicles. That's where I met him, you know, 12 years ago, selling cars, back when I sold cars. And when I went up to his house, his door was locked, which I thought, that's strange. You know, I think, oh my God, he's dead on the floor somewhere. He's, you know, done too many drugs or something, and he's passed out, or he's dead. And I was really scared. And so I went into his back door, and it was hard to get through, but I got in, and sure enough, the place looked different. And I walked around the corner, and I was like, oh, hello. I saw a woman on the couch. And Mountain Man was never to be found. I was like, where's Mountain Man? And she says, well, who are you? And I'm like, well, I was his girlfriend. And then he proceeds to come barreling out of the bathroom, screaming at me to get out of his house, which I did immediately, scared out of my wits. He proceeded to call the police, which is the charts that you're seeing now of when he filed his police report. And then I was arrested in Lafayette that morning. And it's interesting because I was taken to Boulder County Jail. Of course, now I was invited up, mind you, and I have evidence on my phone to show and prove that. And I'm discussing this with the police officers that I didn't ask for a warrant. I don't know why. And it's interesting, when I was driving up to Mountain Man's house, I actually had to stop and get gas. And this is my spirit guides talking. I should have listened. I got turned around, and I ended up at the Lafayette exit. And I still went up the mountain. And that's my intuition, that's me not tuning into my intuition. So anyway, I was arrested, and I was thrown in Boulder County Jail. Now, this incident took place in Clear Creek County. And the dates of this was last December 8th, 2013. I was put in in Boulder County Jail. Now, I was sitting there in the jail for, day after day went by, because I found out, since it happened in Clear Creek County, that they can take up to a week before they can come get you. So that's exactly what they did, is they waited a week to come get me. So as you can see here, this is where I'm arrested. And I just want to point out, whoops, let me get back to my pen, is this nice little happy conjunction of Pluto on my south node. And you know, I really, Maurice, if you're listening, I got to tell you, I loved your asteroid talk the other day. Thank you so much. Take a look at Sirius here. My natal Sirius is at this Scorpio right on my IC. And as you'll see through these charts here, Sirius is very, very pronounced. So this is where I'm arrested, and the chart here is the actual resting, when I was booked in Boulder County. And then I finally got before the judge a week later. And here's my daughter. Okay, I had to bring my daughter's chart in because she was a part of this too, and you can see how she and I are both very karmically linked. Again, bringing in the nodes. Oops. Bringing in the nodes of this 28 Leo. You know, my daughter's south node is right conjunct with that moon right on my ascendant. I mean, obviously there's past life karma between my daughter and I, as it looks as though, to me, you know, having to do with some kind of spiritual organization that maybe she was following with me, and we didn't survive it. Something along those lines. We had some trauma there. So anyway, it's interesting to note here my daughter's chart being this inside chart, this heavy, again, Capricorn, and then that 11 degree on my south node. Her Neptune is conjunct my south node, along with that transit of Pluto at the time being right there as well with my daughter. And she actually had to really hold down the fort and be the adult and be the parent. And she really actually has been my parent through this life. I mean, I've raised two really wonderful children, but they actually have raised me very well. And my mom laughs at that, but it's true. And so here's my daughter's chart, who's definitely one of those 89 babies that was born with that Neptune transit outside of Pluto, which really I think has a lot of worth here as far as this dynamic of her having to come into that adult in that time that I was incapacitated and was, you know, definitely punished for something that I was not guilty of. I guess I should tell you that I was charged with first-degree trespassing and domestic violence, which are 2 felony charges, by the way. So these were pretty heavy-duty, you know, obviously karmic implications that I was facing, even though I did have proof on my phone. The night that the cops came to arrest me, let's just go back to that chart if I can. This, whoops, yeah. This chart here, we can see, obviously, within that, the 0 Scorpio, the moment I'm booked. I found that to be pretty funny. And see the nodal axis being right here as well. I mean, obviously there's a lot of signatures here, and I'm sure a lot of people are. I really wish we were in a forum that I could really have the feedback, because this is where I would really love some feedback from everyone. But as you can see, some of these charts, my daughter and I being hyper connected here as well, and also her having to really rise up to that adult, and certainly she did. She was the rock. She was my rock. When I was starting to disintegrate come Thursday, when I realized, oh, okay, great, I'm going to be here another, through the weekend, this was a real trying time, to say the least. And it really was, it needed obviously this kind of horrific cataclysm for me to go. Even the moment I walked out of his house, I felt relief. I was like, now I know the truth. Now I've got the real truth of our existence together. I needed to see the disconnects in order to come through this horrific, sadomasochistic encounter and relationship, to be able to move through it, to see it, to move through it, to be able to come into more healthy relationship. So that's a picture of me and my daughter, and here's my folks who are also in the mix because they had to bail me out. And so, I love this. And just look at these 2 charts. You can see my parents. And again, these are my wonderful parents. I love my parents. And they're just 2 peas in a pod, are they not? Look at their charts. They're almost identical. And they could almost be soulmates themselves. Married at 19, have been married for, I don't know, 100 years or so. I'm kidding, of course. But they really are, I would say my dad's probably on the fence of third stage individuated to, third stage individuated to first stage, sorry, let me digress. third stage consensus to first stage individuated. And my mom, I would say she's more, you know, keeping up with the Joneses. But my dad's an inventor, and he's definitely was a politician, so I consider him to be a little more advanced. And he definitely, looking at his chart, he's the first chart. The father chart is his you know, with his need to really release in this life, and he certainly has. Now, as you can see also, there were a couple other charts I wanted to quickly show. This is where the case was dismissed after going back and forth to Georgetown 3 times. The DA did not have a case. I had evidence that showed that I was invited up to his house. It was completely a void of course moon night, and the entire experience has been just horrific. I ended up losing pretty much a lot. I mean, I lost in that 9 days clients, my job, my, you know, everything kind of went out the window, but it had to be blown up. So I want to be thankful, and also I want to be aware of our time here. So I just kind of sped through these, and I apologize for that, but I did want to show that confinement of Capricorn and the needing to bust through these old conditionings and these dark arrows through that Pluto energetic. So, you know, I'd like to open it up. If there's any comments or questions, I certainly can address them now. And again, I apologize for going kind of fast through these last portions of the talk. But you know, if there's anything out there that any information at all would be greatly appreciated in these slides as far as input for my growth here. And Mark, I have to tell you, I don't know if Mark's listening, but I have to say, whenever I was lucky enough to engage in Mark's workshop when he was here in town just a couple weeks ago, and thank you for being here, Mark. It was awesome. And I also had to say that these transitions, he always said, Mark, you come into my life whenever I have these major transitions, so there's something about that. I must connect with you at another time. So thank you, everyone. And if there is anything, I'd be certainly happy to answer at this time.
Hey, Michelle, it's Kim. Thank you. I'm just checking the board here to see if anybody has to say anything, any comments or questions, but I'll give you some feedback. You know, it just seems like this Saturn-Pluto mutual reception just takes us down to our core to bust us out of limitations, which is kind of been the theme of your whole talk, and to get us into our own authentic power. You know, how many of us will settle for that false outer power rather than a deep inner power of knowing our own self-worth and knowing who we truly are? And like you said, because I've heard Michelle's story before, not paying attention to those inner wisdoms that come through. You know, like getting yourself turned around at the gas station and still
Yeah.
heading back up that road.
Yeah.
That's the seduction of those separating forces in Pluto. So I'm not seeing any questions or anything, honey. So thank you very much for all of those wonderful slides. And I know that some of them were fast. Just remember, everybody, as we organize ourselves, getting all these recordings accessible to you, you'll have the recordings to look back on and be able to refer in more detail to some of the things that Michelle had put up there. So you got to thank you. Amazing work from someone and just typing in some information on this. Plus, you'll also have Michelle's slides here of her charts to listen to or look at again if you would like to with that. So, okay, last call. Anybody have any questions or comments? I'm not seeing any hands raised. So, thank you. Thank you again, Michelle. Appreciate this very much. And so I'm going to close this out. Before I do, again, we'll be back in 1 more hour with Verta Luz, who will be talking, I don't have his subject in front of me, relocation, locational astrology, and there's something else in it too. So pay attention to your little handouts or go to our website if you want to see the exact title of that. And in the meantime, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Kimmery. Thank you, Leroy.
Mm-hmm.